Welcome back to First Take on 1 Samuel. Today we are in chapter 22 of 1 Samuel. And if you remember, David is on the run from Saul. David has been anointed the next king of Israel. And Saul, the current and reigning king, the Spirit of the Lord has departed from him because of his disobedience. And through that process, his leadership is just spiraling downward. It just keeps getting worse and worse. David is on the run, but is the chosen man of God, and God is protecting him. He hasn't been perfect, but God certainly is blessing him, and he certainly has a heart for God. At the beginning of this chapter, as you might imagine, being public enemy number one, his family is not safe either, David's family. And they come to him. He's hiding in a cave. They come to him, fleeing, seeking refuge. And also, it's interesting, at the beginning of this chapter, it describes that a bunch of other worthless men, outlaws, outcasts of society, are coming to David. David is a very charismatic person, a very good leader, somebody that people would be naturally drawn to, but it's just interesting that these people are coming to David. And we're going to see in later chapters that David actually makes these people into a pretty amazing fighting force. But the immediate concern and problem for David is, how is he going to take care and protect his family? He can't run with them. His parents are really old at this point. He can't just up and leave, and they can't travel great distances with him at a moment's notice. So he takes them to the king of Moab. Moab is a country on the southeast, in the southeast region of the Dead Sea. And so he takes them over there for temporary protection, at least, and the king there agrees to that. And that's the last time that we see David in this chapter. He takes care of his parents in this difficult circumstance that he's in right now, and they're at least safe for the time being. Now we switch to a new scene in chapter 22 where Saul, in his paranoia, is accusing his leaders of not really wanting to help him find David, and it's probably true. David has been a great and mighty and loyal warrior to Saul, and they're probably confused as to why Saul wants to pursue and kill him at this point. But conveniently in the story, there happens to be Doeg the Edomite, who happens to be on the scene and hears Saul saying these kinds of things. Now remember, Doeg the Edomite is the guy who was in the tabernacle while David was asking for the showbread to eat for his troops and his men at the time, when he was fleeing over to the Philistines, when Saul was pursuing him, and he even got Goliath's sword. And Doeg tells Saul all these things. And Saul in his paranoia is thinking, the priests are helping David conspire against me. And so they go to Nob, that's the town where these priests are and the tabernacle is. And he confronts the priests, and the priests legitimately, remember, David had lied to the priests. He said that he was on an errand for Saul when he was there. So the priests legitimately are like, David's your greatest warrior. We've helped him a lot in the past. Why would we not help him now? Well, Saul, in his delirium, is not going to believe it. Instead, what he's going to do is order all the priests killed. Again, we're seeing this huge contrast of Saul being almost kind of like the worst leader possible. Remember, when the people chose Saul, they chose him because they saw that he was head and shoulders above the rest. They thought that he would be the great and mighty leader that would lead them into war and prosperity. But because he has been disobedient and because he has not honored God, even though he might have great physical talents, he is being incredibly destructive to the people of Israel. And they are not being prosperous. Instead, what is happening is he's literally wanting to kill all the priests. As we've seen happen before, Saul's leaders at this point are not going to kill the priests. They're not going to even obey their king. And it's good that they don't. Kill all the priests? You've got to be kidding me. But again, we have Doeg the Edomite on the scene, who's more than willing to try to gain favor with the king. And again, we see a contrast here that should not be. This town of Nob is going to be treated like one of the cities that devoted to destruction, that the people of Israel were supposed to do to the people when they were entering the land in the first place. But this is their own city, own town, and not just any town, but a town where all the priests are. And Doeg doesn't just kill the priests, he kills their families. Even all of their livestock, totally destroying the whole city. And only one priest escapes. Abiathar escapes and finds his way to David and tells him what's happened. And this is where the end of the chapter leaves us. We're right in the middle of this confusing and difficult season in David's life. But I want you to see that it's not just David who's being affected here, but look at all the people in the whole nation of Israel that are being affected by the sin of Saul the king. This entire town was destroyed. The priests were destroyed. These people who were faithful to God. In David's case, he's been faithful, and he knows that he's the next chosen king, but he's on the run. His family has to flee for safety. There's all these different dynamics taking place. He's got to wonder, God, why are these things happening? And then put yourselves in the position of these priests who have done nothing but try and be faithful servants to the king and to God. And they are killed, persecuted, just for serving God. Why does this happen? One thing that we do know is that God is faithful. He doesn't promise us in this life that everything is going to be just wonderful, that everything is going to be fine, but what he does promise us is that he will be with us through those trials. Some of us may even have to suffer to the point of death for our faith, for our Lord. And we need to decide where our true allegiances lie. Is our true allegiance to a king, to a country, even to a family? Or is our true allegiance to our God above all else? This life may not always be easy. In fact, we're promised it won't be if we are truly servants of the true King. Will we be faithful to the end? God does not promise us that this life will be easy. In fact, sometimes it will be very difficult. But he does promise us that in the end, it will be better if we follow him, if we trust in him, even through those difficult circumstances. Because this world is not our home. We live for the next. So even in the dark days, we can still cry out to God. We don't have to pretend like everything is happy, like everything is easy. We can cry out to him and let him know how difficult and hard it is. In fact, many of the Psalms that David writes right through these kinds of situations are, God, why are you allowing these things to happen? Why are my enemies surrounding me? It's okay to ask those questions to God. But in the end, he is still God, and he will make everything right. Thank you for watching this video on First Take on 1 Samuel. If you have any questions or interaction, please feel free to interact with me. I would very much love that. You can also see the text version of this blog at www.jesusdoesn'tgetlost.blogspot.com.